Welcome to Say More from Boston Globe Opinion. I'm Shirley Leung. We've got a special bonus episode of Say More. We broke out of the studio this week to be part of the Globe's Rare Disease Summit. It was supposed to be an in-person event, but a blizzard forced us onto Zoom. But the summit must go on, and it did. Our annual event showcases patients, doctors, researchers, and advocates who are making a difference for the 30 million people in our country living with rare diseases. Yeah, you heard that number right. 30 million people. While these diseases are uncommon unto themselves, collectively, they're not rare at all. You'll be hearing me talk to a father and son whose lives were transformed by a new drug for cystic fibrosis. But first, Say More co-host Anna Kusmer kicked off the summit talking to Wendy Chung, head of pediatrics at Boston Children's Hospital. She's the founder of a program that tests babies at birth for hundreds of diseases. It's called Guardian, and it greatly expands what's typically been tested. The logic, Dr. Chung told Anna, is if you can identify the disease on day one, you can treat it sooner and give babies the best chance.
At this point in the United States, as well as around the world, we use a heel prick where we take a few drops of blood from the heel of every single baby with a system to be able to diagnose and onboard to care so that these children from birth can be able to access the care they need. So it was with that infrastructure in place that we actually worked with families a little over a decade ago to say, what else could we bring forward to newborn screening? We brought forward successfully spinal muscular atrophy, a condition that used to be, past tense, used to be the most common genetic cause of death for children less than 2 years of age, and really revolutionized things in parallel, bringing forward in tight partnership diagnosis, clinical trials, and implementation within a public health system to be able to make this a condition where now every baby is screened. And we have 3 FDA-approved medications, including a one-and-done gene therapy. And so it was within the setting of that success that I started talking with our families about what else. Why limit it thus just to conditions like SMA? What other rare genetic diseases could we put into this platform, and started Guardian, genomic uniform screening against rare diseases in all newborns. That's what the acronym spells out. And within that, it's providing this platform where we can, if you can imagine it, take those few drops of blood from the baby, do the sequencing that we need to do for hundreds of rare genetic conditions to ensure that we leave no child behind and diagnose everyone at birth so that they can access the treatment. And I'm happy to say we're going to be coming to Massachusetts later this year. So the success we've had in New York with over 20,000 babies screened, we're going to bring to Massachusetts. And within this, it's not just diagnosis, but it's onboarding to care, and if it's not care, hopefully cure someday for these conditions.
That's really exciting that you're coming to Massachusetts. I actually had a baby last year, so I'll be missing the new round of testing. But my baby did get a heel prick and tests. So how is the Guardian testing different than the testing my baby received last May?
Yeah, great question. So right now, a lot of what we screen for in Massachusetts and other states is looking for what we call inborn errors of metabolism. It's looking for small metabolites that we can detect in the blood sample. This is adding now another method of screening, that of DNA sequencing. So it gives us flexibility in terms of platforms to be able to very quickly add conditions based on when new treatments are available. If there's a new treatment that's available that becomes FDA approved, or perhaps even as clinical trials become available for otherwise lethal and deadly conditions, being able to flip a switch and instantaneously build that into expansion of newborn screening. So it gives us flexibility that we don't have to wait and do things sort of in stepwise fashion. We can be really nimble and quick and be able to allow families to benefit from the advances that are happening.
And my understanding is that whereas my baby may have been screened for maybe a couple dozen diseases, the Guardian, it could be hundreds. Is that right?
So Anna, just to make it like really concrete, absolutely. So currently we're screening for an additional about 450 conditions. So going from 45 to 450, an order of magnitude greater. And to give you an example, we've diagnosed conditions that produce severe combined immunodeficiency, where we need to do things like a bone marrow transplant to prevent otherwise lethal infections, conditions that literally destroy the brain and take a normal child to a child that dies from a progressive brain condition that we can treat by replacing the enzyme or giving a genetic therapy. We've done that for 2 different conditions already. And another condition that causes tumors in the eye, which cause you to lose vision. And even within the first few weeks of life, can save and have saved children's vision, as well as treat the cancer to prevent it from killing them. So things that otherwise you would never know to look for were it not for some method of screening.
So when you were interviewed in 2023, when the study started, you said you expected to have around a 1% rate of babies coming back with a diagnosis. And I believe that the rate that you actually did have after 3 years was 3%, which is kind of incredible to me, because I'm wondering, it makes me think that there's a lot of kids in your cohort that would have gone undiagnosed. Can you talk a little bit about what is now different for those 2-3% of kids who have this diagnosis they wouldn't have had otherwise?
So you're absolutely right that we placed our estimate of that 1% based on the published literature of what we thought the frequency of those conditions was. What we realized, though, is that people with rare diseases are hiding in plain sight, so to speak. That is, that we're not diagnosing them. In fact, many of them, unfortunately, I've had the experience of diagnosing them after they've died of the condition, never having a diagnosis in life. And so we know people fall through the cracks of our healthcare system. They die before a diagnosis. And of course, as you said, without a diagnosis, we can't get them to the right treatment. And so that 3% actually taught us a lot. That is how much we were underestimating the prevalence of these rare conditions. And I think that's, number one, that's always true when we do population-based screening. And I think we're going to realize that, again, there are a lot of people hiding in plain sight. As we've done this and gone through the experience, what's been very impressive to me is, I think, and it's just a hypothesis, but based on who we've diagnosed, how many children I fear we would have left behind based on just what I know about how they access care, what type of insurance they have, other things that I can see in terms of just knowing our systems of care. And so, and I will say, doctors are busy, parents are busy, and I don't think any one person is at fault. We need to build a more robust system that helps everyone and make sure that no one falls through the cracks. And so that's really, for pound or dollar for dollar, it's an incredibly good investment of our public health system to make sure that we leave no one behind. And I do think we're going to be at an inflection point soon for rare diseases with having platforms to scale treatments. And so we really need to develop the diagnosis arm in parallel with these advancements on the therapeutic side. Otherwise, we're going to miss a generation of children who could benefit from these therapies. And so that's really the point, is to do these in parallel.
And I think, as you're saying, a very key aspect of the Guardian study is that everyone gets a test, regardless of income or insurance. You just spoke to this, but I think the equity implication is so strong, considering the fact that undiagnosed kids would have to have so many doctor's appointments. Can you just talk a little bit more about the equity implication of sort of a blanket test that is available?
Sure. So in doing so, as you correctly said, we've done the experiment. People wondered, would everyone want to do this, or how many people would want to do, because this is a consented research study. We don't force anyone to do any of this. It has been remarkable to see that the majority of families, that is 74% of families, have decided to do this, and it's really been equally representative of the communities that we serve. And so it's not as if this is just one sector of the community or another. Everyone really wants to be able to do this equally. And those who don't, I will be honest, they're not concerned about genetic privacy or things like that. They really just feel like they've got a lot on their plate with a new baby, and it's not the time to think about research, and that's perfectly fine. As we do this, the part that's, when you think about the scale, there is certainly way of being able to make this more cost effective and to do it for less money per baby as you scale in terms of order of magnitude. So it's relatively more expensive if you're going to do 20 babies. You can scale this in terms of getting economies of scale as you get into the thousands, or even as we have in the United States, 3.6 million babies born per year. And so we're trying to think of ways that we can drive down the cost of the screening. And then as you think about even within the first 5 years of life, it is certainly cost effective for society for the journey that you take with the diagnostic odyssey, the long-term disease that you cause without diagnosis and treatment, such that it makes public health sense to do this at scale. And again, in doing this, the economies of scale allow us to make sure that no child is left behind and every child can be their best self.
The expression diagnostic odyssey is so evocative of how arduous it is for families. I really appreciate that expression because I think it says so much. Have you done economic models that say a potential time frame in which tests like this could pay for itself?
So we have, and I think it's important to really think about the parent and the family experience in this. And so we're counting not just the healthcare dollars in terms of what it is for a doctor visit or a hospitalization, but what's the toll on the family? What does it do if you have a parent, for instance, who then needs to be out of work or who needs to take days out of work? What is the impact on society when we lose that productivity in terms of those individuals who contribute? And it's a very sad thing to say, but if you then think about the value of a human life and what it takes in terms of for that person, that child, if we lose that life, and what it takes, and I will say lifelong for that family who may be mourning the loss of a child, siblings, grandparents. When you take the totality of that, it pays off, and you can ascribe various different costs to those factors. But no matter how you weight that, again, if you have a long enough time horizon and if you screen for enough conditions, even with today's treatment, it makes sense and it pays off because you scale this, because you can do this in terms of not just one condition, but the bundle of rare diseases. And in doing this, I will say we do need to still do some work in terms of research to make sure we're interpreting the genetic data equitably, accurately, and we have the systems of care to receive these children once we diagnose them. So we're not ready to flip the switch and do this in terms of all 3.6 billion babies tomorrow. But I do think within the next 5 to 10 years, this should become a reality if we can all get our heads wrapped around it and provide that infrastructure.
In April, a federal advisory committee that would provide guidance on which rare diseases newborns should be screened for, a federal one, was dissolved by the Trump administration. What's the consequence of sort of this pulling back of federal support for blanket screening or, even just coordinating screening?
So the United States is wonderful in the sense that we have states' rights and we also have some coordination across states. The newborn screening space is regulated and governed by the state, so each state decides what they screen for. But it was realized that there was, together we're better. That is, that in thinking about what should be included in newborn screening, most states are close enough to each other, have the same sort of challenges that we should think about having some uniformity across those conditions screened. And certainly with the rigor that it takes to do the evidence review of what conditions should be included, rather than having each state and each district replicate that, it makes sense to do it once and for all across the country. We've lost some of that ability with the coordination, but I do think the spirit of the professional community is there. I think the public health newborn screening programs believe as well that we're better together as we think about this. So whether it comes from the left or the right, I think, and I don't mean politically, one way or another, I think scientifically we're still dedicated the rigor that it takes to be able to make sure we're doing the right things for kids. So one way or another, I think we'll have some infrastructure in place to make sure that we don't leave any state behind as we try and make sure we leave no child behind across the country. And I think other countries actually are going to watch what we do and also benefit from what we're doing.
On the flip side, just yesterday, the FDA announced they're changing their rules to streamline the approval of gene therapies, or I guess gene editing technologies. Can you talk a little bit about that announcement and what it could mean for rare disease treatment?
Yes, I was very excited to see the announcement with the FDA yesterday, being able to have greater flexibility for rare conditions that have a plausible mechanism framework to develop those individualized therapies. And all of these conditions I've been speaking about really fit that framework. That is that they're genetically based, the target is very well validated. Many of the rare disease groups are developing the natural history studies that are necessary for this. And that as we have platforms where you can rinse and repeat, if you can think about it, if you had some way of delivering a particular gene for a condition, 90% of that will be the same mechanism, the same sort of infrastructure that you need. You'll just pop in a different gene or a different set of editors. And so this is really allowing for scaling that going forward. We're not quite there where we have the technology to do that for every gene, every part of the body, but it is critical that it's done at the right time before the damage is done to the body. So each of these pieces is important in terms of catalyzing us to be able to accelerate this whole process. Then this regulatory piece is a very critical piece in going forward. And the rare disease community I can speak for is very excited about this opportunity to be able to move forward these therapies at what I hope will be breakneck speed.
And would you say gene therapy is sort of follows a similar type of logic as the Guardian screening in that to push the technology forward, you are pushing forward the solution for all genetic diseases, therefore not needing 7,000 solutions to 7,000 diseases. Can you talk a little bit more about the way that we can think of rare diseases as sort of a category that we can push forward solutions that would potentially have way more effect than just on one disease or a couple diseases?
So if you can imagine with a genetic condition, there's literally a base pair, or a nucleotide, or a set of nucleotides that you need to fix to be able to correct the problem. You can do that in many ways in a disease agnostic way if you have the tools to be able to literally erase and correct whatever that DNA change is. And so that's a platform that can be, again, a tide that helps all of those boats float, that regardless of what type of condition is, if it's any brain condition, it might be a standard solution. If it's any liver condition, another standard solution in terms of how you get that, those editors or those ways of fixing it to the right tissue, to the right cells. So I don't think it's going to be an infinite number of solutions we need. Just as Guardian will have a platform for diagnosis, I think there are going to be platforms for treatments of being able to fix these genes, correct these genes, and hopefully do it at the right time. We do need to be careful about safety. So I think there are safety issues that are going to be common, and we're getting the data now to be able to show that, in fact, they are quite safe. We need to make sure the treatments are durable. That is, they last hopefully for a lifetime as we go forward. But as we do this, these learnings from one condition, I think, are going to port over to the other conditions. I don't think they'll be unique based on the disease. I think they'll be common to the platforms. And hopefully that'll decrease that cost of being able to make sure that we develop safe and effective treatments in, like I said, record speed.
Dr. Wendy Chung is a physician and geneticist, and she is the chief of the Department of Pediatrics of Boston Children's Hospital. Thank you so much for kicking off today's event with us, Dr. Chung.
Thank you for having me, Anna.
More from the Rare Disease Summit after a short break. Later in the day, I took to the stage to talk about cystic fibrosis, or CF. It's a debilitating disease, and up until recently, people weren't expected to live past their 30s. The session started with a video from 2 decades ago. The speaker is Bob Coughlin, who is staring down a CF diagnosis of his young son.
When Christine, my wife, was about 20 weeks pregnant, we found out that she was a carrier of the CF gene. We found out that I was also a carrier. We then went on to do an amniocentesis, and they did genetic testing on Bobby when he was just about 21 weeks in mom's tummy, and we found out that he was affected with cystic fibrosis. It felt like the whole world was just collapsing around us. It was horrible. We felt that Children's Hospital had the most to offer for us, and we thought that that would be the place where we could get the best care for a child that wasn't even born yet. We've treated the disease very aggressively, and a lot of the studies that are taking place at Children's Hospital, the research that takes place, we're hoping that he can live a long life and ultimately find a cure for this disease. Our dream, our hope for Bobby is that he can live a full, meaningful life, that he can grow to be an adult, that he can learn to drive, that he can get married, and ultimately have his own children. He's a wonderful little boy. He's got a lot of energy, and I think Bobby teaches us how to live life to the fullest so that we can continue on, continue the fight, and live full lives.
After the video, both Bob and Bobby, the son, appeared on screen. Bobby is now in his 20s and he's doing great. I asked Bob how it feels to return to these memories from 20 years ago.
No, Shirley, it's amazing. And that's a video that, we try to remind ourselves at least once a year and watch that and think of how grateful we are and how fortunate we are. Because back then, as you heard in the video, we just hope and prayed that Bobby could live long enough to maybe drive a car or go to college or have a significant other and live a life. And it wasn't guaranteed back then for sure. And a lot of the times I doubted whether or not it would ever happen. So I guess the feeling that you feel when watching a video like this is, wow, dreams do come true, and we're filled with gratitude.
But just remind us a little bit what those early years were like. I mean, I think a lot of people think they know what cystic fibrosis is, or CF. I mean, it's this disease that produces a thick, sticky buildup of mucus, right? And it's almost like tar, and it clogs your lungs and pancreas and making it really hard to breathe. And before these drug breakthroughs, CF patients had to spend hours managing their condition. I mean, they often ended up in the hospital. I mean, what was it like, those early years of Bobby's prognosis?
Well, it was so hard. It was hard on especially my wife, who was his primary caregiver. I mean, having two other children that didn't have the disease, and then having a baby with this disease where the baby's basically born with an expiration date, and things weren't as bright. The future didn't look as bright back then, and there were a lot of hospitalizations. There was chest PT. He had to take pancreatic enzymes just to eat, drink formula. We had to put little beads in applesauce just so he could eat that and digest food. It was very, very, very challenging, but the hard work paid off.
So Bobby, when did you realize, I mean, you had a serious medical condition and life would be different for you?
Yeah, so that's basically probably around when I was in middle school is when I'd say I kind of really came to grips with it, but I always knew I was different than other kids. Granted, when I was in first grade, when I first got to elementary school, I would have to take my enzymes before everyone. I had to eat my applesauce first before I ate my lunch or my snack and I noticed none of the other kids were doing that. So, I mean, there was always that difference there. But middle school is when I kind of really got old enough to be able to say, yeah, this is completely different. And I have to be more careful in a bunch of different ways than all the other kids.
But I remember you were telling me that, but when you were in the 5th grade, you got to play hockey, right?
Yes.
You got to have some, be a normal kid and play some sports.
Yeah.
But you had to eventually quit. Talk about that and why.
Yeah. So another part of my cystic fibrosis is, and this happens to a lot of people with CF, and it's not truly known exactly why, but we get CF liver disease. So I've been diagnosed with that ever since I've been young. And that means my liver is actually enlarged. So it hangs below my rib cage. So this is why once I started playing hockey and I loved it. It was my favorite sport ever. But once I hit that kind of high school level and the intensity picked up and there was body checking and it's just everything happened a lot harder and faster. That's when I had to make the grown-up decision that it wasn't a good idea and that my health was more important, in fact, than playing hockey. But that was a really hard decision to make.
What was it like you watching him play hockey? You-
It was unbelievable. He was so talented and great at it. And it was something that gave us all a sense of normalcy. So it really was devastating. And the reason the liver disease caused portal hypertension and the inability to clot blood. So if he were to get hit, in an adult style game, it could cost him his life. So the doctors really said he's not going to be clotting blood. You don't want internal injuries. You can't play hockey anymore. And that was really the first time in his life where, something was taken away that was so enjoyable. And, it really, the high school years got challenging because that's when his health declined more rapidly as well. And you could hear, when you looked at a clock, you could hear it ticking because, we needed a therapy to come and we needed it to come soon.
Mm. And Bob, I remember you talking about how, both you and your wife were carriers for CF, and you didn't know until, Bobby, was in the womb and you guys both got tested, but it was in your extended family too. And it was, and you didn't think Bobby would grow to be an adult, right?
Yeah, my brother John, I'm the youngest of 6 boys, and my brother John married into a family that had 3 little kids with CF. And unfortunately, they all passed away at the age of 16, 18, and 21. And they were a little bit older than my kids. I have 2 children older than Bobby as well that we did not pass the disease on to. Mary Kate's a carrier. Bobby, Paul is not a carrier, but both Christine and I passed our mutation onto Bobby, and we found out in utero that he was going to have CF. And, our outlook was probably even more dismal than most because of our experience through extended family with the disease.
I mean, how many years do you think you spent thinking this might not be a good outcome for us? I mean, it was a long time, right?
Yeah, I think of when I was in the house when that video was taken, I was cautiously optimistic. But then after leaving the house and joining the Patrick administration and then becoming the CEO of MassBio, all those years working so close to the industry and working so closely with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation to raise money and invest in so many companies, I think the harder we worked on it, the more depressing it got because we learned how challenging it was to invent these therapies for these rare diseases. So it was really up until Bobby was about 17 when we realized that, a mystery was cracked and we thought we would be able to get a modulator style drug that would work for his combination of mutations. And lo and behold, by, on November 9th, 2019, when Bobby was 18 years old, that therapy became a reality.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, you talk to patients, CF patients with this particular mutation that Bobby has. Everybody remembers that date. Bobby, where were you when you learned that the FDA had approved, I think this drug is called Trikafta, right? It's made by this Boston life sciences firm, Vertex. Where were you when you heard that the FDA approved it and that you might be able to get it?
I want to say I was in like Dick's Sporting Goods or something like that.
Yeah, you were.
Yeah.
And you were a junior or senior in high school or something? How old were you?
I was a junior, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And wait, what were you doing at Dick's?
Probably just, I can't even remember because honestly, the only thing that I do remember is hearing that news, that great news, right? We were all just happy, I think, and a little bit shocked, to be honest.
Yeah. I was crying. And the people, I'm going to cry right now. People were asking if I was okay, and it was, we were more than okay.
Wow. And Bob, first, can you briefly explain the science of this drug?
Yeah, well, this combination product of drugs was one of the first precision medicines approved in the world because it works for specific mutations. And this drug is the 4th generation of these modulators that was invented, and it works for everybody that has one copy of the Delta 508 or the 508 Delta mutation, which Bobby has one copy of. And they were able to crack the mystery to get it to work on patients that have one copy of that most common mutation. The unfortunate part of the story is that there's still about 6 to 7% of the CF community that doesn't have one of these breakthrough therapies that actually corrects the underlying cause of the disease. So in a sense, you take these 3 pills a day and the symptoms of the disease go away. And in Bobby's case, his pulmonary function test, his lung function has improved back to what it was when he was about 4 years old. And the height that he's gained and the weight that he's gained, there's still end-stage liver disease issues that he needs to deal with that aren't getting better. But a lot of these young children that go on these modulators at a young age, before the disease has ravaged their organs in their body, they're remaining healthy. It's really miraculous.
Yeah, Bob, what was it like for you to take those first set of pills from of Trikafta?
Yeah, so this is kind of interesting. So obviously it was very new to me. It's a new drug. We didn't really know the entire effects besides that it was supposed to be, well, we really didn't know what it was going to be.
Bobby was too sick to be in the clinical trial. So his first time taking therapy was when it was approved and approved by insurance and brought to our house. And then boom, it's time to take these pills.
And you didn't know who was going to work then?
No, exactly. We had no idea. And we didn't know how my body would react to it too, because obviously with any drug, there's side effects for different people. People experience different side effects that can be in other ways not necessarily worth actually taking the drug. So I was pretty optimistic. I didn't want to get my hopes up too much because I didn't want to set myself up for that just crushing realization that I would not be able to take this drug. So I was kind of optimistic, but within a week, I was feeling amazing, kind of because my body was getting used to it, and it truly was. And ever since, it's been amazing.
And just before, I mean, you would spend 5 or 6 hours dealing with your CF, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. So just throughout the day to eat foods with fats and proteins, I'd have to take multiple enzymes a day, up to 6 enzymes before I eat anything containing fats. And those only cover you for about an hour. So think of all the hours in a day when you're eating foods with fats, whether it's taking a bite of something or eating a full-blown meal. I'd have to take anywhere from 4 to 6 enzymes just to do that. And then I had my other medicine that I had to take every morning, every night. So it really adds up. It was probably around 8 pills in the morning and 5 at night, maybe. And then that's not even mentioning the nebulizers and the chest PT, which was about an hour of nebulizers. And then another 30 minutes where I had a chest physical therapist coming out to my house and hitting on my chest like that, making sure, trying to keep my lungs clear. And I also had a vest too as I got older to replace the chest PT, but that was another 30 minutes as well.
Bob, you've watched Vertex do multiple versions of CF drugs. I mean, and the others didn't work, or the others weren't for him. I mean, what was going through your mind,
Yeah, the first 3 versions of these modulators didn't work for Bobby's specific mutation. And, it was bittersweet. You were happy for the patients that it did work for, and then you're just crushed that it didn't work for your own child. And that's why that feeling when we finally got one that worked for Bobby, all the CF community and the CF parents, we all, and this is a rare disease conference that we're speaking at today, we all bond together and say, we're never going to give up until everybody has it. And that's not everybody in the CF community. That goes for all the other rare genetic disorders out there. We all have to band together and do what's right and raise money and invest in companies and change policy so that no patients are left behind. My wife and I know what it feels like on both sides of that, this extreme sadness and the extreme joy and elation. So it's definitely been a roller coaster, Shirley. And I think most of the people who are participating in this important summit today realize the extreme ups and the extreme downs that you go through caring for patients with rare disease and hunting for therapies for these unmet medical needs.
I mean, Bob, clearly Trifecta is been a miracle drug for your family, for Bobby, and for others like Bobby. I mean, it doesn't work for everyone. I think, especially I think Black and Latino populations. Also, it's Vertex has come under criticism for costing, I think, over $300,000 a year for the drug. I mean, how do you work out those limitations? How do you solve that?
Well, when you think of how expensive it is to invent these therapies, and when it's a rare disease population, there's not a large market for it. So this is risk and supply and demand. You think about it, these drugs, it probably cost upwards of $13 billion in 18 years to invent this drug that less than 30,000 patients in the US are taking. So what happens is, I say flip it on its head and think of it this way. I can't think of any CF patients in the US that are going without. If people don't have insurance, companies, there's all sorts of charitable organizations, and the manufacturer of the drug will make sure people have access to it. And we're helping people with that all the time. But more importantly, think of when this drug is generic in a short period of time. You only have a window to get that money back plus a reasonable profit. This is going to be a generic drug in no time at all. And now you're not going to have all those associated costs with the disease, like the hospitalizations every year and the clean outs and all the other therapies. So these drugs, not only do they provide life for patients, but they avoid costs elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and as rare diseases go, I mean, CF it has a higher profile than most rare diseases. And I mean, Bob, do you think this kind of long history of advocacy and private fundraising, I mean, is this why Trikafta and others before that? I mean, that's why there is a drug for various mutations of CF and it, like, how did that happen? How did that come about?
Well, when Dr. Francis Collins identified the cystic fibrosis gene, did the mutation late in the 1980s, Bob Bell was the CEO of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation at the time, and he's a hero of mine. He invented, which is now coined venture philanthropy. We said, let's go out, raise money, and invest directly into companies that will chase this rare genetic disease. You have to pay for that research and for that science. And working locally here with another hero of ours who passed away, Joe O'Donnell, who saved my life. Joe, basically, he came to me when Bobby was born. He said, kid, why don't we go raise $100 million and buy a cure for your kid so he doesn't die like my kid did? Turns out little Bobby and little Joe O'Donnell were both born on May 1st, separated many years apart from one another.
Wow.
And Joe went on to raise close to $500 million to invest directly into companies. And when you think of how Michael J. Fox and multiple myeloma and, all these other disease foundations have learned from that model that works, we got to continue to do it. We have to continue to do it, especially for these ultra rare disorders. Who else is going to do it? So parents band together and they work with folks to go raise money and invest directly into this research.
I mean, Bobby, when you hear your dad talk about, what happened, to get this miracle drug for you, I mean, how can this be a model for, other rare diseases? I mean, you're at Mass Bio now and working. So how can you think this can be some kind of model?
Yeah, so I mean, at least my shift down the line is 100% interested in this whole patient advocacy thing, right? And that's definitely what I want to do. But it's just incredible, especially everything that has been done in my entire lifetime. This is essentially all in my lifespan. But to think back when I was just a little baby, all this happening behind the scenes, it's truly incredible. And watching all these other parents really just come together and band on what they care about and really driving that home to get that money raised for cystic fibrosis and other rare diseases as well. I'm starting to see it happening, which is incredible. So I definitely want to focus on patient advocacy 100%. Certain I want to do that, kind of aim my sights on that because it's all I know when I think back at my whole life.
I mean, throughout today, we've heard of the power of parent advocacy. Dr. Tommy Martin was here before this session, and Bob, you embody that. I mean, you were in the video, you were still a state rep from Dedham. Then you took a big leap to run the biotech trade group Mass Bio, and so talk about that. How did how did his prognosis push you to say, listen, I need to do this. I didn't need to make this my professional life as well. My life's mission to work with the life sciences industry and find a cure or a drug therapy for rare diseases like CF.
Well, Shirley, I've always been the type of person that, like, when I see a problem, I want to solve it. So imagine seeing the worst problem you could ever face in your life is being told your child's going to die. But that wasn't acceptable. And not being a doctor or not being a scientist, but being someone who was a policymaker, I had the opportunity to work with so many bright people to change policy and laws so that Massachusetts could get better at biotech. And then we really saw a greater problem. The only way you can solve these extremely challenging problems is if you get people to work together. How do you get academia, industry, and government to work together? That wasn't happening in Massachusetts back in the early 2000s. And by the creation under Governor Patrick to create the Massachusetts Life Science Initiative, the first 10-year billion-dollar life science initiative, was really the shot heard around the world. And I wanted to be the person in Massachusetts who could hold academia, industry, and government accountable so that we're all rowing in the boat together, so that we had the best chance in the world to solve these unmet medical needs. And I'll be the first to admit that, yeah, it was selfish. I didn't want my kid to die, but this was about every single known unmet medical need. And think about it, folks. Why are we doing this today via Zoom? The weather here is horrible. The traffic isn't better. We have an outdated transit system. How did we become the best place in the world for innovation? We did it by getting academia, industry, and government to work together and really take that ingenuity that we're known for here in Massachusetts and put it to work so that you can solve unmet medical need, which is, in my opinion, the hardest thing in the world to do.
Mm. And even though Trikafta works so well for Bobby, I was surprised to learn that he doesn't want to take it forever. And the final frontier for CF treatment is gene therapy, actually repairing the faulty gene and fixing the root of the problem, this genetic mutation. And so Bob, how close are we to that day that Bobby's CF can be cured?
Well, I look at the CFTR modulators. This class of drug is basically just buying us time. It's giving us a runway so that we have enough time to ultimately cure this disease. There is no cure for cystic fibrosis out there. This is not the end of the final chapter of this story. There's still a percentage of our population that are dying because they don't even have this therapy, and gene therapy is the answer. So, I don't want to go out on a limb and say it's going to happen tomorrow or next week, but we're getting closer and closer with gene therapy, cell and gene therapy, and gene editing and gene modification in other areas and other diseases. And this isn't just a CF play, Shirley, and to everybody in the audience. This is about all unmet medical need, and we need to continue to fuel the research and push the research and hold the FDA accountable as well, and continue to push for NIH funding and both private and public capital so that we can make this a reality. But I think in Bobby's lifetime, and I couldn't have said this 6 years ago, that gene therapy will be a reality.
Bobby, how do you see this? I mean, what do you think about your own life? Like, how long will you be taking, was it two blue pills, one orange pill a day?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you look to your own future?
Yeah, no. So obviously very similar to what my dad just said. Like, I don't want to have to take meds my whole life. Like, my whole life, I've just wanted to be like other people, right? Just kind of average. Like, why can't I just be average and not have to take all these medicines, right? But that's not the reality of it, because, well, here we are. But yeah, so I do not want to have to take all those meds, because who knows what, like, the long-term effects of taking all that medicine is. It might be a whole nother slew of issues in itself. So obviously I would rather just try to be able to go into that gene and repair the gene at the root of the issue. And that would be ideal, because then my body could try to heal itself where it can.
Well, thank you, Bob and Bobby,
Thank
for
you.
sharing your incredible journey, and thank you for everybody for Watching this. Bob Dad, Bob the father. I know Bob and Bobby, right? Bob the father, still works closely with the life sciences industry. He's the managing director at commercial real estate giant JLL, and Bobby is working at Mass Bio. Graduated from, I think, UMass Boston not that long ago. So congratulations, and maybe we'll do this another, 10 years later, we'll do a checkup, right? Maybe we'll be talking about the miracle of gene therapy in 10 years, right?
Great.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this bonus episode of Say More. We will link to the Globe's events newsletter so you can stay up to date on all future Globe events, virtual and in person. Say More is a production of the Boston Globe. Today's episode was produced by Anna Kusmer. Our editor is Jim Dow. Our engineer is Uzair Ahmed. Special thanks to the Globe events team. If you like the show, please follow us and leave us a review. You can email us at saymore@globe.com. I'm Shirley Leung. Thanks for listening.